Desktop audio. Which way do you go about it? Do you like an all-in-one unit, or do you like separate components on your desktop? I like both. I like a mixture of both. But I do enjoy the convenience of an all-in-one, that's for sure. And today we're looking at one of those, and that is the Earmen ST Amp. Let's get it. What's cracking, audio fans? It's David here from Prime Audio Reviews. So here is the ST Amp from Earmen. Now, this unit retails currently at $599 US, and it's kind of like an amp, a headphone amp, and a preamp with DAC functionality built into it. Usually it's the other way around. Usually you sort of get a DAC that has a headphone amp or pre-out functionality built in after the fact. So let's have a look at the unit. It's pretty stylish. I like the color scheme here. So we've got a pretty basic setup on the front here. Got your power switch, your DAC mode and amp mode switch. Nice big Alps potentiometer there, your big volume knob. You've got a balanced 4.4mm headphone jack and a single-ended 6.35mm headphone jack. Let's switch around to the back. And over here we got a 4.4mm balanced analog input. You got single-ended RCA inputs, you got your RCA pre-out, and you've got a 4.4mm pre-out as well. And the only digital input is via USB type B here. And of course your power goes here. But guess what? For some reason, Earmen did not include a power cable or a USB cable in the box, and that wasn't an accident, that was intentional as far as I'm aware. I don't know why they chose to go that route, but I imagine for some people it might be a bit of an inconvenience. So it's a rather interesting device. I haven't seen anything quite like it before. The build quality is really nice. And as I mentioned, I do like the color scheme here. One thing that I don't like though, check this out. There's only 3 feet on the unit. And that means that sometimes when you're handling it, like when you're changing the switches or you want to plug something into the back, it does that. It does that. And that's not really a big deal, I guess, because you're not going to touch it that often. It doesn't happen when you're just adjusting the volume. You can flick the switches without it happening, but every now and then it happens, and it just kind of takes away from the experience a little bit. So I would wish that Earmen had just added 4 feet. I don't know what the thinking was behind that, but it's a small issue. Let's talk about the internals for a second, and inside here we've got, it's a fairly modest ES9280 DAC chip, so a little Sabre DAC chip in there. It's not one of the latest ones, it's not a flagship one. In fact, I think it's the same one they used in, what was their single-ended dongle DAC, the Eagle? I think it was in the Eagle. I could be wrong, don't quote me on that, but yeah, so got a little DAC chip inside there. And as for the headphone outputs, it's using 2 TPA 6120 op amps. Now in terms of output power, you get a pretty impressive 1.85 watts from the balanced output, and the single-ended drops right down to 0.5 watts, which is actually enough. It's sufficient for the majority of headphones out there. I have used this with my Sennheiser HD650s. It's got plenty of power for that, just out of the single-ended, with plenty of headroom. I was probably, I don't know, around 12, 11, 10 to 12 o'clock on the dial here for the Sennies. I also tested out my HiFiMan Sundara, the planar magnetic headphones. They sounded really good with this amp for some reason. And I tested a few IEMs as well, including sensitive IEMs, and I'm happy to say that even with sensitive IEMs, I didn't hear any background noise, I didn't hear any hiss or noise floor whatsoever. Now for the majority of my testing, I used this in DAC mode. So I had running from my PC to the USB here, and from there I was using headphones predominantly, although I did test the preamp functionality as well, and that works really good. So I'll start off talking about how this guy sounds as an all-in-one unit, as a combined DAC and headphone amplifier. So how does it sound? Initially I started using it for everyday use, for just casual listening for a couple of days. After those couple of days I sat down and started some critical listening. Now, to my ears, Earmen products tend to sound a little bit different than all the, there's so many topping and SMSL DACs that I'm getting in, and I'm so used to hearing them, which basically go for a very neutral sound signature. This little guy here has, it's hard to explain. I wouldn't call it colored at all. It has a certain character to the sound, and that's predominantly due to, the amp circuit. But in terms of tonal character, the ST Amp sounds very clean, but it's nuanced as well. Bass notes are really well defined, but they are authoritative, so you get that nice snappy bass response, but there's loads of power and weight behind bass notes as well. And in addition, there's a lot of texture in the bass. I noticed a lot. And you've got that snappy leading edge, but you've still got a natural roundness to the bass and a natural decay as well. It doesn't cut off too fast, it doesn't sound unnatural whatsoever, but it is very controlled, it's very tight. Like, kick drums sound really crisp and punchy with trailing edges that fade away naturally. The mid-range sounds really spacious and exact, but it's also brimming with engagement. It's kind of an emotive sound for me, although it's really, really clean. And that texture that's in the bass carries over into the mid-range as well, so you get really nice crunch for electric guitars, and with acoustic guitars and violins and things, the nice instrument timbre. Vocals sound really lovely, and overall it's a very natural sound. The treble is nice and crisp, it's open, it's airy, it's neutral in its forwardness, it's not exaggerated or forced in any way, and that lends itself to a smooth yet exciting expression. How it can be so even and smooth yet so precise at the same time is a bit of a dichotomy there, but it's one that I thoroughly relish. One thing that I noticed in particular about the ST Amp was its gloriously wide soundstage and pinpoint imaging. Sounds can project well outside of my headspace when I'm using headphones. Really great soundstage when I'm using speakers as a preamp as well, using powered monitors, of course. The placement of instruments and vocals is really precise, and combined with the spacing between all those elements, it really can create a virtual 3D space, and it's really captivating. Now remember, I'm talking as an all-in-one unit, the DAC and amp included. Now in terms of just an analog amplifier, I hooked this up to my Topping E70 Velvet via the RCA inputs. And when I did that, the character of the little ST Amp changed somewhat. So hooked up to the Topping E70 Velvet, the resolution was even more impressive. I love the sound of that new AK, 4499EX, the new AKM DAC chips. I love that. And pairing that DAC with an amplifier as capable as this, you're in for some good times. Using that same DAC with its sort of matching, L70 headphone amplifier from Topping, the Topping sounds a touch drier than the ST Amp, but I don't want to say this one, it doesn't sound in any way saturated. It's just got that. If you've heard products from Earmen before, you might understand what I'm talking about. Very neutral sound, very clean, but they somehow seem to project a little bit more energy, expression in the bass. Like the treble, as I said, is extremely smooth, yet it's very crisp, it's very precise. The mid-range is really spacious and nuanced and clean. Overall, it just sounds incredible. I love the gritty texture that that the ST Amp produces and the sort of airiness that it does. And as I mentioned, I tested a bunch of headphones and IEMs. All of them sounded great. There is a tiny little bit of channel imbalance at super low, like at notch 1, where you can barely hear the music, even with sensitive IEMs. But once you get to like the second mark there, so you get really precise volume control with this excellent volume knob here. One thing I found really interesting, like from the lowest volume point here up until like, let's say maybe 11 o'clock on the mark there, you get this fairly linear rise in volume. But once you get from between like 10 and maybe 2 o'clock, it seems to even out for a bit. And then once you get on the other side down here, it starts to rise again. I'm not sure what that's all about. I think it might be intentional, because for some reason it works great with IEMs, but there's heaps of power as well for my more demanding headphones. So it's a really versatile little unit, and it's been really interesting to use. This is definitely something I would recommend. I love the sound of Earmen products. It's a little bit different from a lot of the chi-fi stuff in terms of the tonal character, but they always excel in resolution, and soundstage imaging is all fantastic. So this is a really good device. You could use this if you're like looking for an all-in-one, just that's all you need. There you go. But you can also pair it with an existing system, like you can hook it up with a high-end DAC and enjoy the benefits of that as well. So I think that is pretty much everything. Earmen ST Amp. Love this thing, highly recommend it, and yeah, I'll wrap it up there. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, PARFAM audiophile style. Don't forget to check the links in the description. I got my social media channels and everything down there. If you're new here and you're not subscribed, consider hitting that button so you don't miss out on future videos. And until next time, I'll see you later.